What's up, everybody? Thank you for the time to watch this video. If you could watch from the beginning to the end to help us reach more people in the algorithm. We're going to be reviewing this article from the Catholic.com website, and it is titled, "What is the Battle of Armageddon?" It says, a real battle, a symbolic one. Did it happen in the past, or is it yet to come? Here's your one-stop info shot for the end of the world. Now, we know the Catholic sect is not inspired, and this is one article that proves it. Now, the Catholic sect has released information that all of the book of Revelation up to chapter 20 has already been fulfilled, and they believe that we're living in the time period of chapter 20, verse 1 through 10. So they say the Battle of Armageddon has already occurred. But during this article, we're going to see that they have released information that they believe Jesus did not begin ruling and reigning until 70 AD, one of the wars in which Jerusalem was beginning to be destroyed, and that's just not true. So it says, what is the Battle of Armageddon? A real battle, symbolic one? Did it happen in the past? Is it yet to come? So they say it's in the past. In a popular speech, Armageddon has become a term for the final military battle of world history. It also has extended a meaning that can refer to any devastating conflict, whether or not it would be the final one. Thus, the Cold War, people feared that World War III would bring about a nuclear Armageddon, even if the human race survived. And they say people are asking these questions because there is now war raging in Ukraine. I agree. People are saying, is Armageddon about to occur? But I disagree with the Catholics that they say this was an event, Armageddon, before or during 70 AD. The Bible specifically says that it's not. The basis for this idea is found in a passage in the book of Revelation that describes the trio of evil beings, the dragon, which is the devil, the beast, and the false prophet, who disgorge three foul spirits like frogs that go abroad into the kings of the whole earth to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. These kings then assemble at a place which is in Hebrew called Armageddon. So even the Catholics say this has already occurred. I agree, but we know they're not inspired because they have the timeline of events wrong. They have it wrong, and I'll prove that. We are told that they will make war with the Lamb, Jesus, and the Lamb will conquer them. This conflict is described in Revelation 19, 11 through 21, and the outcome is that the beast and the false prophet are captured and thrown alive into hell, while the devil is bound for 1,000 years so that he cannot deceive the nations during the millennium. They say we're currently living in this time period. However, the devil is afterward released and he deceives the nations and again gathers them for battle. They say this has not yet occurred. So they say the devil right now is bound, but there will be a time before Jesus' second coming that he will be released. His army is then destroyed by fire. He is thrown into hell alongside the beast and the false prophet. Now, this has many implications of error for the purpose of them saying Jesus didn't begin reigning and ruling until Jerusalem was destroyed or war began against it, because Jesus said all authority is given to him in heaven and on earth. And that was when he ascended into heaven. Ephesians 1 says Jesus received all authority when he ascended into heaven. Under the Old Testament, there were nations that were disobedient to God, yet God is still described as the governor of the nations. God would rule over the nations. Even Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged that God is a king of kings. King David called God his king. God was ruling even though people were disobedient. So just because you have nations disobedient does not mean that Jesus is not exercising that authority today as the resurrected Messiah. But it says this: contrary to popular usage, Revelation depicts Armageddon not as the final battle of history, but as one preceding the reign of Christ. So they say Jesus is not yet reigning until Armageddon takes place. But notice they're going to say Armageddon took place sometime during the 60s. So they don't believe Jesus began reigning until the 60s, because they say, contrary to popular usage, Revelation depicts, so they're saying contrary to popular belief, the fact is they're saying Revelation depicts Armageddon as an event preceding the reign of Christ. Yet Jesus is already reigning at the time the book of Revelation was written, literally. But the problem is when you start to take these things as literal, it messes up your eschatology. Then they're just talking about Megiddo. They're talking about how they came up with that term. And they just say, whatever the case, Megiddo has a long-term history as a site of battles. It was strategically important in location, and numerous battles have been fought there, both before and after the founding of Israel. Revelation thus invokes history as a site of warfare. The question is, how literal is the conflict involving Megiddo and Armageddon? And then it says, many premillennialists, especially dispensationalists, see this as a literal military conflict that will occur in Israel with forces led by the Antichrist just before the beginning of the earthly reign of Christ in the millennium. They say Jesus is already reigning right now. And then it says here, look what it says. We'll just read this. However, there will not be an earthly reign of Christ before the end of the world. You can read more about this in my 20 Answers booklet. Instead, the millennium is best understood as the reign of Christ that is occurring now in heaven and through his church on earth. Okay, but Jesus was reigning in heaven and on earth before the so-called Armageddon. Jesus was already ruling in his kingdom, and John was ruling in the kingdom with him. John says, I, your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom. It's just the book of Revelation uses certain futuristic terminology to show that they would stay victorious, to show that the persecutor would become the persecuted, the oppressor would become the oppressed. The Battle of Armageddon thus might be understood as related to the Jewish wars of the 60s. What happened to the inspiration of the Catholic sect? I thought that they knew the truth, but yet here's an article posted by Catholic.com, posted by supposedly the one church that has all truth. And here we are in 2022, and it says might be. The Battle of Armageddon thus might be understood. What happened to the ones who had inspiration, who God was communicating to us today? God wants us to be possibly wrong? No, it's because these people aren't inspired like they state. This is one example. The fact that they say might be shows that they don't have the truth, right? It shows they're not inspired. It might be, this might be the meaning of it. Well, what happened to inspiration? It said Armageddon, according to the Catholics, might be understood as related to the Jewish war of the 60s when the forces of pagan Rome, the beast, attacked Jerusalem and destroyed his temple. So they say, though, the Battle of Armageddon was the Jewish wars of the 60s, but they said that Armageddon represents the battle preceding the reign of Christ, as one preceding the reign of Christ. So they don't believe Jesus was reigning until Jerusalem was destroyed? That's weird, and that's silly. So going back to where we left off, alternately, it may be understood not as a literal military conflict, but as a spiritual conflict between the forces of paganism and the gospel. Wait, so they're saying, it could be the Jewish war, or alternately, or maybe, what happened to inspiration? I know you guys are catching on to this. What happened to inspiration? Inspiration says this is what it is. And then you have somebody supposedly inspired says, it could be the Jewish wars, or maybe, or it might be, right? It may be understood this way. Or, what was the other thing he said? Let me go back up. Did I already pass it? I think I already passed it. Where he said, it might be. Right here. Is in the paragraph above. I searched the whole thing. Thus might be understood. So it might be this, or it may be alternately, maybe. It's like, how many choices are you going to come up with to be concerning the fact that you're claiming to be inspired? Well, it's this, or what? It may be understood not as literal military conflict, but as a spiritual conflict between the forces of paganism and the gospel, which led to the devil being bound so that he could not stop the proclamation of Christ to the nations. Revelation would be depicting the spiritual conflict in military terms and drawing on a history of Megiddo as a site of warfare. That is part of that imagery. However, Armageddon is to be understood. Revelation does predict a future conflict at the end of the Christian age, and it may involve military as well as spiritual elements, including the involvement of the Antichrist. So there he's talking about Gog and Magog, So he's saying that that's still in our future. But Armageddon, well, that happened during the 60s. Armageddon thus might be related to the Jewish War of the 60s. Did you know that the beast, who they say is pagan Rome, the beast is a reference to the 11th Roman emperor of Daniel 7 and called the 8th king in Revelation chapter 17, verse 10 and 11. And it's a reference to the ruler of Rome, Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 AD. So how could Armageddon, which is pictured as during the reign of the beast, during the reign of Domitian, during the reign that began in 81 AD, how could that be about the Jewish wars in the 60s if how could Armageddon, which includes the beast, be during the 60s if the beast didn't even begin his reign until 81 AD? They're placing this event 20-something years, 10 to 20-something years before the beast even began reigning. That's how we know the Catholic sect is not inspired like they want you to believe. So there's that article. I believe that was the end of it. So what are your thoughts? Do you believe that the Catholics are correct in their interpretation? Or do you believe that it's still in our future? Do you think it's in our past? Do you think the beast was reigning during the 60s? Who do you think the beast is? I'd like to see their list. Who are the 11 kings of Daniel 7 and who are the 8 kings of Revelation chapter 17, verse 10 and 11? That's who I'd like to see them put down. So this is Catholic.com, who posted this article in 2022. I wonder, did they receive revelation about what is it? Is it the wars in the 60s or is it a spiritual conflict? Because they said, well, it might be, or alternately, or it could be, well, maybe it could be. So in 2 years, did they receive clarification? No. It's not about during the 60s. It's not. The beast didn't even begin reigning until 81 AD. So let me know your thoughts on it. Hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. And I appreciate you staying with me to watch this video.